Breaking news tonight reports that Russia and Turkey have brokered a ceasefire in Aleppo, Syria. And without the U.S., the ceasefire presumably will allow civilians and rebel fighters to evacuate and return the city to government control. The fighting may have stopped, at least for now, but hundreds of thousands already have been killed there, making it one of the worst humanitarian disasters in history. Again, presumably the ceasefire will hold, but what happens after that? Joining me now to discuss, Amber Smith, Zuhdi Jasser, and Michael Prejean. Zuhdi, let me start with you. Your thoughts on how this is all ending. It's probably a worst-case scenario for many people, but we all almost saw it coming as well.
Yeah, I mean, Charles, it's the end for the citizens of East Aleppo that are being massacred and tortured and assassinated in execution style from neighborhood to neighborhood by Russians, by Syrian soldiers and monsters that are killing tens of thousands. And the evacuation that started, they told them to leave or be killed and be considered to be terrorists this weekend. 37,000 tried to leave, and they now were getting reports that were being blocked by Iranian forces and some Russian forces, in addition to the Syrian military. So there's no way out for them. They have nowhere to go, and if they give up, they'll be killed anyway. I have family in South Aleppo, cousins, aunts, and uncles. They are beyond despondent. They don't know what to do. They're frightened, and the world is really doing nothing. They need a UN protection force. They need safe zones, and there's none of that. They're just massive massacres. And by the way, this is not just Aleppo. It's going to go to Idlib. It's going to go to other cities as the Syrians and Russians know that they can do this and get away with it.
Yeah, Amber, you know, again, we were backing the rebels. It was never. I guess it was always half-hearted, just like the so-called red line. Perhaps that was the first signal to Assad and Vladimir Putin and others that we were not to be taken seriously, and consequently, we've got a real ugly disaster.
Yeah, definitely. And we have a whole lot less options on the table now than we did 5 years ago when Obama was drawing red lines and making threats and before the Russians got involved. And then now we have what we see today where the situation is much more complex and to where some of those U.S. aligned rebel groups are now between a rock and a hard place, and they have to decide basically, am I going to join another terrorist organization like ISIS or Al-Qaeda for their own survival?
You've spent considerable time in the Middle East and Iraq and Afghanistan. What options are left? What should America's policy be? Should we say, hey, we can't be the savior of the world anymore? We're not going to be the sheriff and put American lives at risk in a place as dangerous as Syria?
Well, look, we have invested lots of blood and treasure in the Middle East, and it is definitely fair to say that stability in the Middle East is within our national security interests, and that includes Syria as well. So I think that prior to Russia getting involved complicates the situation. So right now it's going to be some serious diplomacy, some heavy pressure on Russia to back out of Syria, because if if Russia backs out of Syria, the Assad regime is not going to be able to survive for very long.
Right? I mean, Michael, you know the area very well. It's Russia is you know, it's a strategic location for them. You know, Assad is their guy. He's in power, and I don't know how we could even ever make up this lost ground or a lost effort. So the question is, what does happen from here on out?
Well, what's going to happen in the next 38 days is Russia, Assad, and Iran are going to continue these types of operations. I don't think the ceasefire is going to hold. They're going to take this battle to Idlib. And what they're trying to do is ensure that when President Trump comes in office January 20th, that the narrative that they've been pushing for 2 years, that it's either us or ISIS, will actually be a reality on the ground, because there will be no rebel resistance left, because the Russians, the Iranians, and Assad are using every military tool, every proxy on the ground to punish the population of Syria and to push the rebels into the arms of Jabhat al-Nusra and ISIS. So that's what we're looking at the next 38 days.
Zuhdi, for American policy to be successful in other parts of the Middle East, we've got to have some pretty eclectic or strange coalitions, particularly in Iraq. After watching how we allowed the Syrian rebels that we backed to come to this sort of demise, will anyone trust this anymore? How can American policy under the President Trump even prevail, no matter what it is, considering our track record?
Well, we have to, Charles, have a policy that's clear, principles that we stand for, and coalitions that believe in our values, be it freedom, democracy, and self-determination. So in Syria, why don't we use the Bosnian template and start to have UN protection forces in there? Let the UN not just turn into sort of broadcasters looking at a game from afar and counting numbers and bodies on the streets, but rather having forces in that allow humanitarian aid to come in, and saying that we won't allow Iran and Russia to sort of allow this Darwinian process of massacres to happen, but actually allowing a country to self-determine, which is what Western countries believe in and what the UN should stand for, rather than simply reporting from abroad.
Yeah, it's scary, though. When you're hanging your hat on the UN coming to the rescue, it's a scary thought. Guys, thank you all very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.